Okay, so let's start the lecture. So today we have the pleasure of Bill Chen coming here to speak to us. So Bill has won 2 World Series of Poker bracelets. Okay, so Bill has won 2 World Series of Poker bracelets. Is a very well-respected professional poker player for years, probably before I could even count. He's from Susquehanna International Group, which is a global quantitative trading firm headquartered in Philadelphia, and he teaches weekly educational poker classes for the people there. And he co-authored this book, and this was one of the prizes for the class last year, called The Mathematics of Poker. So without further ado, Bill, take it away.
Well, thank you. I guess the microphone isn't working, or?
No, it's not. It should be.
All right.
It's on? Yeah, the green light's on.
All right. I'd like to thank everyone. It's always a pleasure coming to MIT and speaking, and this is a rare opportunity because this is, instead of like a 10 or 30-minute presentation, this is an actual classroom where so I'm going to take an opportunity to do something that I rarely do, which is actually introduce the game theory and the game theory of poker. I figure this is MIT. You guys can probably pick these things up. I'll try to. I might go a little quickly, but hang in there. The rewards will be there. I like to start off with. So my talk's going to be in 3 parts. The first part, I'm going to give you a quick intro to game theory. Most of the intro to game theory was done by a coworker, Dan Loeb, but most of the stuff that we apply game theory to in our book was done with Jared Ankerman. And Jared is now about to get his PhD from Yale in math. So I'm going to give a quick intro to game theory. That should take about 35 minutes. We're going to do some poker problems. Everybody has the sheet. You can start thinking about these problems while those of you who already know game theory pretty cool can start thinking about these problems and solutions to these problems. We'll talk about these for a while. And then at the end, we'll have 15 to 20 minutes of questions. You can ask me anything about what I talked about, or playing the World Series or whatever. Random questions. All right, if that's the plan, let's just start. So let's talk about. Why is this not working? Yeah. Oh, I see. I just click it. Okay. All right. So let's first talk about what's a game. If we're talking about game theory as applied to poker, we have to ask, what's a game? So a game's a situation in which, quote, players have choices, and the outcome of the game can be more or less favorable to each player depending on the interaction of these choices. This is a pretty vague definition, right? So let's go on and clarify it. So there are a lot of variables. Number of players could be 1, 2, or many. And there could be a chance in the rules. It could be random or it could be deterministic. There could be, the information could be hidden or it could be common knowledge. The order of play could be sequential or simultaneous. And it can be zero, sum, or cooperative play. These are kind of the 5 big things that we're talking about in terms of game theory. A little bit of history of game theory. It was actually the first book on kind of 2-player games was done by John von Neumann in the 1920s, and John Nash kind of developed a theory for multiplayer games. He found this Nash equilibrium, which he won the Nobel Prize many years later for, and and it presented in the movie Beautiful Mind, which really isn't representative of what Nash equilibria are, but Okay, so basically what we really want to talk about is like two-player deterministic, no hidden information, simultaneous play games. Let's get some examples of games. So when I teach this class, normally we just write up on a board a bunch of games. You know, checkers, chess, Go, bridge, ultimate frisbee, you know, whatever. And we kind of classify the games according to those categories. But since this is kind of a quick intro to game theory, well, let's just go through a few of the games. So combinatorial games are what kind of Professor Berlekamp in Berkeley studies. I think some of you may have read his books. If you haven't, it's great. He actually studies Go a lot. So all of these games, you know, chess, checkers, Go, tic-tac-toe, NIM, dots and boxes. Does anybody even know what dots and boxes are? Okay. These are two-player games. They're all deterministic. They're all common knowledge. What does that mean, common knowledge? There's no hidden information. Nobody has like whole cards that the other person doesn't see or whatever. It's sequential play. You move, the other guy moves, so on and so forth. And it's zero sum. You either win or you lose or there's a draw. But you both can't win and you both can't lose. So it's a zero sum game. These games are so when I say, you know, chess is kind of the same as tic-tac-toe, that makes some chess players kind of mad. But essentially, chess is, if you classify it this way, the same as tic-tac-toe. You just kind of do the tree and figure out what the optimal move is, and you never have to vary your strategy. If you have the perfect strategy, you never have to vary your strategy, and so on and so forth. All right, so this is combinatorial games. Backgammon is a combinatorial game, except that it has kind of randomness in the dice. Now we're going to eventually study games that have randomness in the strategy, but not randomness in the rules of the game itself. So backgammon's poker is an interesting game. By the way, this is a guy who just won a bracelet. He's pretty happy. It could be two players, heads up or more. It's certainly random. There's definitely hidden information. It's sequential play, although you could have some forms of poker, I guess, which are simultaneous play. It's usually zero sum, and there's a caveat here. Unless the house is taking percentage of the pot in some tournaments, right? If the house is taking 10%, say, one of the cases is if you're small blind against big blind and you're playing like a 5-10 game, and if you decide to chop the blinds, the house doesn't take any money. But if you play a pot, the house takes money. Then it's probably right to sort of chop the pot there, because you're colluding against the house. Well, it might not be right for both players, but it's at least right for one player to agree to do that. Bridge is kind of an interesting game. Just out of curiosity, how many people here actually play bridge? Raise your hand. Oh, wow, okay. That's cool. I thought it would be much fewer than this. Bridge is one of my favorite games, but nobody plays it anymore. So there's actually two players. There seems to be four players, but there's actually only two players. Each is a two-person team. It's random. And the hidden information is kind of weird because it's hidden within a team. Like, I don't see what North has, and North doesn't see what South has. If you did, it would be a lot easier to play. It's a sequential play, and it's zero sum. So these are kind of games that are easy to formalize and easy to describe. So we're going to talk about zero-sum matrix games, odds, evens, or Rochambeau. Do you guys know what games I'm talking about here? So odd even is this bar game. By the way, credit card roulette is a much better way to figure out who pays for drinks. But basically, odd even, everybody, one person's odds and one person's even, and it's kind of at the count of three, you hold up either one finger or two fingers. And if the sum is odd, the odd person wins. If the sum is even, the even person wins. So there are two players. It's deterministic. But see, the strategies can be random. This is what I mean. Like, if you play rock, paper, scissors, right, playing a deterministic strategy is pretty silly. The other person would probably figure it out and probably figure out how to exploit it pretty quickly. Unless you play the avalanche, which is rock, rock, rock. That apparently works for some reason. Common knowledge means there's no hidden information at all. The play is simultaneous, and it's zero-sum. And we'll begin by studying these games. We'll come back to these games later, but I'll point out kind of the variety of games. Solitaire is definitely a game. It's kind of a one-player game, and you just try to maximize your own equity. Voting systems. This is a game. Since sorry, I don't have a picture of the fiscal cliff that we're all falling off, but basically the players are Congress, the president, and vice president. So there are many players. The senators, the Congress critters, representatives, the vice president and president. Is it deterministic? Well, I don't know. It's some of the parliamentary rules are unclear. It's common knowledge, but there's also wheeling and dealing behind closed doors. But the voting is in public. When they vote for bills in public, but the deal making is behind closed doors. And it's sequential play, and it's cooperative play because sometimes when they don't pass a bill, it's bad for everyone. The fiscal cliff and all that. Oftentimes, both sides are forced to compromise because of this cooperative play aspect. It's not a zero-sum game. One of the interesting things about political coalitions, of course, is that there's a natural equilibrium there because the party in power the party not in power tends to want to bring in more people so they get in power. And the party in power, if they're a big majority, kind of the core supporters tries to get their bill passed. And that kind of alienates the kind of the more moderate members of the party because so there's a natural kind of coalition there. The stock market where I work, there are many players. It's random. There's hidden information. It's simultaneous play. And it's kind of zero-sum, modulo like taxes, commissions, the SEC, the politicians, etc. And so auctions, where the highest bidder gets the well, are examples of games. So let's just go to zero-sum two-player games because we kind of want to finish the class at a reasonable time. But that's kind of the universe of games that we can study with game theory. But we're going to talk about zero-sum two-player games. Let's talk about the odd-even game. So there are two players. By the way, the players will always be named the same thing. The two players are Rose Todd and Colin Stevens. So Rose and Colin, because in the Matrix they're Rose and Collins. I can see that really frown at this. So Rose Todd and Colin Stevens. So each player simultaneously displays one or two fingers. So Stevens wins when it's odd or it's even, right? Stevens wins when it's even, and Todd wins if it's odd. All right. So the player. So this is the strategy table here. This is the payoff to Colin Stevens shown in the table. So if both pick 1, then Colin Stevens wins because it's even and it's 1. And he gets $1. If both pick 2, then it's again even and he gets $1. If they pick different numbers, then Rose Todd wins and she gets $1 from Colin Stevens. And they can kind of, keep playing this. So there's, before all this von Neumann, John Nash stuff, there was this theory of move by Stephen J. Brahms. So basically what it is you take a guy's strategy, not very, very good, and then you see what strategy beats that strategy. And then you go, well, what strategy will beat... you go, okay, well, we take x0. We take y1, which beats x0. Now we take x2, which beats y1, and then we keep changing our strategy. This sort of works for chess, by the way, but this will actually give you the solution for a chess game, for a chess position. By the way, I meant all these chess comments because I thought Jen Shahadi was going to be here. But anyway, so this theory doesn't really work here. Well, why? It's obvious. If they both choose 1, then Rose is going to choose 2. But you can see this sort of cycle of moves. We're back where we started. So there's no stable solution, which we call an equilibrium. But however, so this theory of moves doesn't really work. There is something called a Nash equilibrium, which, as I mentioned, John Nash, who won the Nobel Prize in 1994 for his analysis of equilibria in the theory of non-cooperative games. He extended von Neumann and Morgenstern's work. So a Nash equilibrium is basically just a set of strategies such that no player has an incentive to unilaterally change their strategy. So it's a strategy for both X and Y, such that I can show you what my strategy is, and you won't be able to do anything to. X can tell Y his strategy. Y won't be able to improve on his strategy. But similarly, Y can tell X his strategy, and you can't, and X cannot improve on his equity by changing his strategy. Obviously, if you keep it with pure strategies for the odd even game, there's no Nash equilibrium, right? Because you can keep changing. So that's what I said on the bottom. None of the 4 possible combinations is a Nash equilibrium. All right. When you allow mixed strategies, you do get a Nash equilibrium. What's the Nash equilibrium strategy intuitively if you're playing even and odd? Do each half the time. Right. What's your expectation? Right, because whatever the other guy does, your expectation is 0, right? You're going to win half the time, lose half the time. The other guy can stare at you and try to figure you out, or he can just play 1 all the time. And he can play stupidly or try to figure you out, and the equity is 0. So Rose selects R1 X% at a time and R2 100 minus X% at a time. You can draw these equity graphs. This is like Rose's mixed strategy and Colin's mixed strategy. But 50-50 is the unique Nash equilibrium for this game. Okay. Well, this is kind of a boring game. So, yeah, there's some explanation of graphs and lines and why it works, but it's pretty clear why it works. So both players, if either player unilaterally changes his strategy, he's not better off, right? That's just the thing. This is kind of a degenerate equilibrium, as all these kind of games are. It's a Nash equilibrium because if I'm playing 50-50, there's no way you can change your strategy to take advantage of me. So you should basically play 50-50. However, if you change your strategy from 50-50, then you can be exploitable. This is kind of the idea of Nash kind of a degenerate Nash equilibrium. Now in poker, this happens some of the time. If you have a mixed strategy of raising or calling with a particular hand, and the other guy is kind of playing optimally, you can either choose a raise all the time or call all the time. And if he doesn't change his strategy, you won't be exploitable. However, if he feels that you're like raising too much, then he can change his strategy to exploit yours, and so on and so forth. But this is the idea of a Nash equilibrium. Let's change the rules so it's not so obvious. We'll get into poker quickly, but let's just kind of go through this game. So let's change the payoff from odd and evens. Now there are two players. There's Robber Rose and Cop Colin. Rose and Colin is still playing, but they're playing cops and robbers now. So basically, the payoffs are the same as odd even, except if Rose does nothing and Colin does nothing, the payoff is 0. So Rose can either try to rob or not rob. Colin can try to catch her or not catch her. If Rose robs and Colin doesn't catch, then basically Colin loses a buck. If Rose tries to rob him and Colin tries to catch her, then Colin actually wins a buck because he catches her, she goes to jail. If Rose doesn't try to catch her and try to rob, and Colin spends resources to try to catch her, then Colin still loses $1. The reason for that is because he has to waste resources to like stand out and try to catch her, and she doesn't do anything. I say Rose is sociopathic robber. Okay, Rose is a terrorist. Okay, what's the optimal strategy of this game? Does anybody know? So it's the same as even odd, except there's a 0 instead of 1 here. So whose advantage is whose advantage do you think the game should be? It should be Rose's game. So do you see a way Rose can play to guarantee kind of a positive return?
Yes, if Rose just never robs, either win or 0.
Well, if Rose never robs, then Colin never catches, and Rose is actually a 0. So
if he doesn't rob 90%.
So if Rose robs 10% of the time, Colin can still not catch her, and Rose wins like a tenth of the dollar. Yeah, right. So that's basically the idea. I'll just tell you the solution. Basically, the way you would solve this is you would set up the equations and kind of find a point of indifference. Basically, you would do what you would say, but find the percentage of Rose robbing the person, robbing Colin, so that whether Colin tries to catch her or not, the equity is the same. And that happens if when Rose tries to rob a third of the time. Let's check that out at least in the table. If Rose tries to rob Colin a third of the time, and Colin doesn't try to catch her, what's the equity of the game from Colin's perspective? If Rose tries to rob a third of the time and Colin just doesn't catch, then it's going to be minus 1/3, because a third of the time she's going to get $1. If Colin always tries to catch her, then it's still a third, because Colin minus a third, because Colin loses $1 2/3 of the time and wins $1 a third of the time, and negative 2/3 plus a third is a third. So negative 2/3 plus a third is negative a third. So in this particular case, the equilibrium solution is for Rose to try to rob a third at a time. In fact, you can solve the equivalent equation for Colin, and you get that the right strategy for Colin is to try to catch Rose a third of the time. So this is kind of interesting in that particular way. So remember this game, all right, cops and robbers, because it'll come up later. And the solution is The equity of the game is minus a third, just like the problems I'm going to ask later. The solution of the game is minus a third, and the right strategy is for rows to rob a third at a time and call in a catcher a third at a time. All right? Remember that. Important. Okay, we'll go into poker now. So this is kind of interesting. This is kind of the first attempt at trying to find a non-trivial poker game. Whenever I try to solve a problem, I always try to find kind of the first non-trivial example of where the interesting thing happens. You know, poker is all about bluffing and all that. Bluffing and value betting, and basically poker is only interesting because of the betting that happens kind of afterwards. It's not very interesting if you just deal cards and showdown, right? You might as well play like the slot machines or whatever. So let's talk about the Ace King Queen game. So the story is that two cavemen wanted to play poker, but cards hadn't been invented yet. One guy invents the ace. He's like, oh, that's good. It's not much of a game if you just have an ace, right? You can probably flip in the air and see which side it lines up on. So the other guy, oh, I got a good idea. I'll come up with the king. Okay, now you have a two-card deck, and you have randomness now. You can shuffle and deal, right? And there's some element of chance, right? You'll either get the ace or the king, right? But unfortunately, even though there's an element of chance now, it's still not a very interesting game because, okay, well, let's deal out the hand and let's do some betting, right? The guy with the king probably figures out quickly he probably shouldn't call and probably shouldn't try to bluff or in any way put any money in the pot, right? The other guy's going to have the ace and is going to be very happy to gamble it up with him if you call that gambling. So that's not a very interesting game. The game, so the interesting thing is when you get the queen, now if I deal you one card and if I deal person one card and the other person the other card, now there's kind of a game, right? Like if you have the king, you don't know whether the other person has the ace or queen. So that's kind of the story of the game. So let's actually, so this is the first poker game we're going to go through. Let's talk about the rules of the game. Each player, there are two players, raising rows and calling. Okay, not as much of a groan. So both players are dealt a whole card from a three-card deck, which includes an ace, a king, and a queen. Each player may look at his card, but not at his opponent's. So each person gets their own whole card. It's one card stud. So raise and rose. So each person antes $1 into this pot. So raise and rose may bet $1. So only Rose has the privilege of betting or checking. We're going to make this game as simple as possible. One betting round, only Rose can bet. And if Rose bets, Colin can either call or fold, and then the hand is over. If Rose checks, then the hand is over. Whoops, let's not show that table yet. So do you guys all understand the game? You guys all play poker, right? So I don't really have to go through what the payouts are for each of these scenarios. If Rose bets and Colin folds, Rose wins the pot. If Rose bets and Colin calls, now both players have $2 in the pot, and the winning player just gets $2, and so on and so forth. All right. So does everyone understand the game? Does anybody not understand the game? Okay, good. Let's talk about strategies for the game. Since there are only like a few cards, I should stay close to the microphone, I guess. Since there are only a few cards in a game, let's talk about what you would do with each card. Let's look at it from Colin's perspective first, as a person that's calling. If Colin has the ace, so Colin doesn't have any decision unless Rose bets. If Colin has the ace and Rose bets, what should Colin do? Call, right. If Colin has the queen and Rose bets, what should Colin do? That's pretty clear, right? If Colin has a king, what should he do? What? What did you say? It depends. Right. You don't really know. Okay, let's go to Rose's strategy now. Suppose Rose has the ace. Should she bet or should she just show down her hand? Bet. That's correct. Because she's going to win, but she might get called. If you have the nuts, you should bet. If you're last. It's always good. See, Matt's learning stuff from this. So if you have a king, if Rose has the king, what should she do? Sometimes bet? What? Sometimes bet. Okay.
If he has the queen, he folds. If he has the ace, he calls. So you better just show the game.
That's correct. What's your name?
Jonathan?
Jonathan, right. What Jonathan said is correct. Rose should never bet a king. Why? Because Colin either has the ace or the queen. If Colin has the ace, he's going to call. If Colin has the queen, he's going to fold. You're never going to get an advantage by betting the ace. By betting the king. It's not a tricky play, but it's a play a lot of players decide to do. If you have like a mediocre strength hand, a lot of players just want to check down and win. You kind of want to check down and hope to win instead of betting. The problem is if you bet, you'll get called by better hands and you'll only get worse hands to fold. That's sort of a situation where you don't want to be in. Okay, so Rose always bets. So this is what we found. So Rose will always bet an ace, never bet a king, but sometimes bet a queen. What's the advantage of betting a queen? Yeah, the king could fold, right. And Colin always calls with an ace, always folds with the queen, but may call or fold with the king. All right. So let's see. They have both viable strategies. R1 is Rose's strategy of betting, stealing with the queen. So those of you who want to try to figure out this game can think about what the right strategy is. How many people already know what the right strategy is? Oh, good. Okay. People aren't that sure. Okay. Well, I'll just keep talking and...
Can I ask something?
Yes.
Regarding the folding, always folding when you have a queen, I'm sorry if you analyze the game that's what's going to come up. But in principle, I don't see why it's a priori known. In principle, there is an answer. So it's possible that you could go for drawing and it could have some value. I'm sure that the numbers will not turn out that way.
What's your question? There could be value in calling with a queen. Why?
Because if for example, the pot was a priori very big, you have a small chance of...
You don't have any chance because...
Or you have a chance of drawing.
Oh, no, there's no chance of drawing. The cards are dealt out without replacement.
No, that's what I mean. Maybe the other guy has a queen too, and then you said...
There are only 3 cards in a deck, and it's dealt without replacement. So, yeah. Yeah, definitely, if there are multiple queens in a deck, it may be right to call with a queen if the pot's large. Okay, so basically there's just like one particular thing you can vary, right? Rose can decide whether to bet with a queen, which would be stealing or bluffing, or check with a queen and just like accept her defeat and give Colin the pot. Colin can decide to call, fold a king, or call a king. So these are kind of the 2 viable strategies. So we have this here. Let's look at Colin's expected value in one of these scenarios. So the bottom one is pretty easy. Rose always checks a queen, and Colin always folds a king. So in the bottom scenario, the payoff has to be 0, right? It's just kind of showdown poker. Whoever has the best. They're both being like pretty honest people. So if Rose bets a queen and Colin calls with a king, then Colin gets 1. You can see I enumerated all 6 possibilities. If Colin has an ace and Rose has a king, Colin wins 1. If Colin has an ace and Rose has a queen, Colin does win 2. Why? Because she'll bet and he'll call, so he'll win 2. Similarly, if Colin has a king and Rose has the ace, Colin will lose 2. Why? Because she'll bet and he'll call. So this turns out to be 1 for Colin. On the other hand, if Rose checks the queen and Colin's going to still call with the king, then the payoff is -1 because there's just like 1 extra dollar lost when Rose actually has the ace and bets and gets Colin with the king. Similarly, if Rose will bet a queen and Colin will fold the king, then all the time, then he still loses 1 more dollar because there's going to be because when Rose bets the queen, she's going to turn a $1 loss to a $1 win half the time, and she's going to turn a $1 loss to a $2 loss half the time. So if you normalize, the equities are 1/6 negative, 1/6 negative, 1/6 and 0 for these are sort of the 2 pure strategies Rose can play, and these are the 2 pure strategies that Colin can play. So does anybody know what the right strategy is to this game yet? Yeah. The Cops and Robbers, right. It is very much like but how can it be like the other game? This is like a poker game. We're playing moves that are simultaneous and there's hidden information, right? So, but the interesting thing is, it is like, this is the ace king queen game in kind of matrix form, and this is kind of the Cops and Robbers game in matrix form. You see, these 2 games are pretty different, right? Poker is inherently more complex because there are hidden cards, and there's like there's randomness in this game, right? There's no in the poker game. There's randomness. There's hidden cards, and there's sequential play. Like Rose does something, and then Colin does something, right? That all makes it harder because in the matrix game, there's no excuse me. There's no sequential play. There's just one play. Both players make the play at the same time. And there's no hidden information, and there's no randomness. There may be randomness in the strategy, but there's no randomness in the rules. But so what's the right strategy for the game? What's the right strategy for the game for Rose and Colin? Yeah. Bluff a third at a time when you have the queen, and Colin's strategy is what? Call a third at a time when you have the king. And what's the value of the game? Negative 1/18. Right. That's the value of the game because this is just scaled up by 6. Okay. So basically what we've gone through there is kind of a game theory solution of this game, of this poker game. And this is kind of what I want to talk about. What we study, what Jared and I study in our book, and what Matt's going to talk about next week is basically our philosophy towards poker, which is trying to find these optimal play solutions. So I've kind of compared and contrasted optimal versus exploitive play, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So the question is, why play optimally in poker? Isn't poker just about reading your opponents and then adjusting? See, this is, of course, we know that not to be true now, but this is what people, like in the 80s, were saying about poker. It's like, even some of the top players, like you read Doyle's book, and Super System. By the way, that's one of the first poker books I read, and it was great, right? It really kind of opened my eyes. But then there's a section where say you have ace king, you raise, and you flop top pair, and you bet. And the other guy raises you 3 or 4 times the pot, because they used to do that in the old days. And what do? It's like, and his answer is, well, it all comes down to people. That's great advice for Doyle. I mean, he could probably read people. He's good at that. It's like, but okay, that's going to be really hard for me to read that book and kind of pick up what to do. So optimal play is akin to using standard market metrics. You can evaluate. Since I teach this in finance class, I give them the idea. You can evaluate an option price based on the current price, volatility, interest rate, and so on, without any prediction on the performance of the underlying equity. Like, well, what's the call of IBM at 70? Well, do you think? Well, you can go. Well, do you think IBM is going to go up or down? You go, no. IBM's fairly priced where it is. You can evaluate where it is, and it also does help to know what optimal play is, even though you're going to deviate from it. So I'm basically accused by Jared of deviating from optimal play all the time. And I probably do, like more than him. But it's good to know that even if you're calling, you think he's bluffing a little bit more, and you're going to exploit that by calling a little bit more, it's still kind of good to know what the optimal calling frequency is, just so you have something to anchor yourself to. Like, if he changes his strategy, you can just go back to optimal play, So sometimes you're also against somebody who's a top-ranked player because of his reading skills, where you don't want to get into that type of contest with him. And I've been in kind of this situation at the end a lot. I was heads up with Phil Ivey at one point. I lost for my bracelet. But, people were asking, well, didn't Phil raise you the last time you got into this situation, and weren't you thinking about that? I'm like, I don't really want to think about that, because if I start thinking about that, he's going to win at that game. So, I'm not going to do that. Also, I've played against Grinder at no limits, and it's the same thing. You don't want to think about that in that situation. A lot of people pointed out in the World Series event where I had ace king, and it was the final table of the Players Championship. 7 players left. Guy goes all in. I have ace king. I flat called. Basically, Grinder made 3 times. I flat called for about I don't know, 50, 60,000. Grinder made it like 200, 300,000, and I decided to go all in. And it was wrong. He had aces. The aces held up. He won. He won the tournament. He won $2 million. Whatever. But against those type of players, you don't really want to try to guess at what they're doing. A lot of people said, "Oh, he raised a small amount. That must mean he has aces or kings." That might be a good read, but I kind of feel that's not really a good read against the top players who kind of know what they're doing. I would love to play against players who, if they made a small raise, it meant they had aces or kings. That would be great. By the way, if you're playing against me and you have aces, no, never mind. Exploitive play, I'll give some examples. Sure, if you see your opponent's whole cards, you can play exploitively, and this happens like in the financial world too. It shouldn't happen, but it does. The problem, we have to worry about that trading with other people. Like if somebody's just buying up stock or going long in a particular equity, we have to worry, does this guy have information? If we do, we gotta kind of worry about it. So if I have a tell on my opponent, of course, then I can exploit that. And if I have information on my opponent's past behavior, the last part has been discounted a little bit too much. But I think that the last bit is probably more important than getting any physical tells on a table. And people who played online now have, thousands and thousands of hands of history. Suppose I know that, say, you bluff too much, or if you bluff 3 times in a row, you're not going to bluff the 4th time. Then this type of stuff is, exploitable. Okay, so end of the slideshow. I guess, first of all, just any quick questions before we go into the problems about optimal play? All right. If not, we're going to go into, how much time do we have? Okay, great. We have about, we want to take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, I think we should give people a 5-minute break.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll talk about solutions to this